And if people can start putting their name and affiliation in the chat, that would be great. I would like to welcome everybody to the 271st convening of the Broadband Hui. You know, we've been doing this since March of 2020, and you know, pulled community stakeholders together since COVID days in order to help address the issues around the digital divide and resources that were coming to bear on helping to close the digital divide. So the Broadband Hui has been a result of kind of a consistent gathering of people interested in what's happening with broadband and digital equity. So I want to appreciate everybody's continued support for the Broadband Hui as we move forward. Okay, so let's see. Normally we have Chrissy kind of co-host with us, but I think she's in North Carolina right now. So I'll go ahead and take care of business here. Let me just share real quickly our sort of mana'o of the day, our little wisdom of the day. And let me share this. Hold on. So this is a Japanese term called obaitori, and obaitori is every flower blooms differently. Now, this is kind of a variation on, you know, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and I thought it appropriate because, you know, over the course of the last week, as I encounter various things, I like to maybe sort of look back at it and see how it's sort of shaped, you know, how we move forward. Of course, I think on the last call we mentioned that Riley Saito, who was one of our co-conveners, had passed away, and Shola, thanks to Shola, she actually sent out an email providing a video of Riley, and there was a lot of good response. A lot of acknowledgement and condolences that were sent in from the Hui. So I thought that was kind of a heartfelt representation of Riley and his participation and his contribution to, you know, what we've been doing with the Broadband Hui. And you know, so he sort of stood out as a shining example of you know, a flower in its bloom. And then yesterday I had an opportunity to participate in the Kamehameha School Ed Tech conference, and I moderated a panel of young students. They're all, you know, like juniors and seniors, and we talked about a variety of different things. One of which is, you know, who they define themselves as, and how do they see technology shaping, you know, their future. And when I talk to high school students, a lot of them are really, really bright compared to when I went to high school. And I thought, you know, in each of them is also representative of a flower that's, you know, blooming. And so obaitori kind of stood out as a way to describe, you know, how some of the unique qualifications or qualities of people, you know, as they interact with all of us. And every flower blooms differently. You know, a cherry blossom does not compete with the maple tree, and they bloom on their own time. And of course, we're not in any race with anyone except our past selves. So that's kind of the mana'o of the day, and I wanted to share a couple of thoughts and experiences that I had over the past week, and hopefully, you know, you can sort of resonate with some of that. Now, with that, let's jump into our agenda, and we have some new folks on the call. I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves. But um, you know, there's some interesting developments going on, and I wanted to bring those to your attention. But first off, I wanted to give Chung a chance to make an announcement, and then we'll jump into our agenda with our guest speakers. So, Chung.
Thanks, Bert. I was originally scheduled to be at the end of the Hui meeting, but I got called into a meeting, so I have to leave before the cost complete. So I do want to make this announcement in the beginning. I'll just say it. So our fearless convener, leader, and kind of everything broadband from the very beginning. Bert is retiring at the end of this month. So I wanted to make that announcement and make it official. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a loss because the work will continue. And so we've committed to each other that we will still continue to push the closing the digital divide effort. Yeah, I'm hoping it's not, our work will be seamless, that we'll continue the partnership. And very importantly, this Hui call will continue. And Bert will take ownership of that and take the convening with him as part of his effort, continuing effort. So just wanted to make that announcement because I think the word is getting out. I know Bert didn't want to make it a big deal, but I do think it is a big deal. And so after this, we'll put a little message out to the Hui so that everyone gets a message. Thanks, Bert. And so, yeah, it's I know you and I kind of talked, and I think the realization is kind of setting in, right? But, wow, it's June already, and it's going to be into this month. But like I said, the work continues. As everyone knows, Bert is a fireball spark plug that energizes a bunny, and he'll just keep going. So I appreciate all the years that Bert has led broadband, yeah, work continues. Thanks, Bert.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chung. Really appreciate that. And as Chung said, we will continue with the Broadband Hui. We will continue our sort of first and third Wednesdays of the month. And Chung and I have talked about how the Broadband Hui can continue to be a part of the closing of the digital divide and some of the issues around broadband. And what I wanted to do is make sure that we still have community involvement, community engagement, and Chung has reassured me that there's an open door for any dialogue, discussion with the broadband office. So I think it'll be a great partnership moving forward, and I'm happy to convene as long as we have all of you who are attending the Broadband Hui. If you're there, I will be there. So mahalo everybody for the continued support. All right, thanks. Okay, so with that, we will continue. And what I wanted to first provide an opportunity is to welcome Mallory from Congressman Ed Case's office. And Mallory, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Mr. or Meister?
Meister, yeah.
Meister.
Mm-hmm.
And I invited Mallory to kind of share some of the finer details of the congressional what's it called, the community projects fund, and every year, our house members have a community projects fund, and we submitted something. Well, this was well, Mallory, you can share the timeline, and I'm just excited that we were able to get an earmark. But I don't want to take any way of your thunder, Mallory. Go ahead and share what the Congressman Ed Case was able to do.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys. It's lovely to meet everyone. Like Bert said, my name is Mallory. Born and raised in Kaneohe. I went to Punahou and I've been in the congressman's office for almost 2 years now. I recently acquired the broadband portfolio a few months ago, so I'm not an expert by any means. So I'm gonna love getting to know everyone and learning from you all in the future. But yeah, I want to highlight the CPF community project funding. If I use those interchangeably, they mean the same thing. So in fiscal year 2026, the congressman requested $975,000 for a network infrastructure and community connectivity project through the Hawaii Broadband Office. I see we have a couple folks in that office, so I'm sorry if you are hearing this again. But that funding was going to go to renovating community centers to update broadband infrastructure equipment. So the funding was going to go to the Palama Settlement, Kukui Center, Wesley Center, excuse me, the Lanakila Multipurpose Center, the Hawaii Tech Academy, and Huio Haula. So I'm going to put some links in the chat here if you folks want to read them. So this one is our financial disclosure letter that kind of says like the nitty gritty of it. So that was our initial request. In July of 2025, we had the markup for this bill when we found out that we were going to get $250,000 for the project. A little bit discouraging, but since we are in the minority, we just get simply less money than our majority colleagues do. But still very encouraging that we were included at all, because a lot of the CPFs from the Dem side were not included at all, or kind of just received abysmal amounts of funding. So really encouraging that we got this. So here is our initial press release that just kind of talks about the project again. So the funding kind of goes towards network enhancements, rewiring, installation of Wi-Fi. Again, all of the nitty gritty broadband things. I know you all are experts. You don't have to tell you what this means. And in January of this year, the House passed this bill, meaning that the funding will be distributed soon. It usually takes a year to 18 months. Don't quote me on that exactly. It all depends. But yeah, that funding will start to hit the pipeline hopefully next year. We will remain engaged with you folks and making sure that funding is exported smoothly and there's no hiccups with it. So here's our other press release, just talking about it again. So that's kind of an overview of the project. If you folks have any other broadband related requests for next year, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I will put my email in the chat right here. We can chat online, offline, whatever your preference is. And if you just have a question of like, hey, I'm not sure if this will be eligible, we can absolutely chat that out. And this would go under the transportation and housing bill. So just kind of flagging that for you folks. But yeah, that's kind of a brief overview. If anyone has any questions, let me know. I will do my best to answer them. But again, I'm still new to the portfolio, so patience is requested with me.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Valerie. Yeah, and what the interesting process was is that we worked with the office and went through some of the proper kind of wording, I think, that would be well received, by the folks that are reading through all the proposals and determining whether they merit any kind of funding. So that was an interesting exercise, and that's why it sort of moved more toward an infrastructure kind of build out. And it had taken a little bit of a while, and we were very pleasantly surprised that we got something. So we did get a letter from the HUD headquarters, and are kind of now waiting to see what the process is. Once it gets kind of like trickled down to some of the other administrative organizations that need to definitely be involved, like our local HUD office. I will, probably be retired by then, but I want to still be involved. So from a community standpoint, as we start to see the actual process unfold, we'll definitely be here to help in any way that we can. And I would definitely be inviting Chung and the team to come on and give us any updates as they see it start to flow into the local market. Chung?
Yeah, I want to show the appreciation publicly that our congressional delegation went up to bat to get this fund. So I appreciate Congressman Case for going up to bat and getting this fund for us. And yeah, Mallory, we look forward to asking for more earmark in the future. And I'm hoping this will be successful. We certainly are looking forward to deploying this fund in the community. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, I saw your question in the chat. So we are limited to funding within our district. So if there's a idea in the second district, which would be under Rep. Takuda, still send it our way, and we can communicate with them. If there's a statewide nexus, then we can submit it, but we are limited to our district or statewide. So just flagging for that.
Yeah, and Mallory, that's a good point. The process was quite inviting because Congressman Case's office actually reached out to us and said, "Hey, you guys got anything you want to submit?" And we thought, yeah, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And I thought that was very not only inviting but accommodating, for us to respond with something. And I would think that going forward it would be similar. So I would definitely pay attention to when those invites occur and take advantage of it. So again, Mallory, really appreciate your support and the support from Congressman Case, to provide some of the funding for us. And of course we have a good relationship with Joe Takuda's office. We just, timing wise, I think we wanted to put some of our emphasis on the proposal that we submitted, and there were a couple that were sort of in Congressional District 2 anyway, so it was sort of statewide as a result.
Yeah, Bert, right? Because there were other earmarks that we had proposed to get funding for, but it just didn't make it through that process. This one just happened to have a positive outcome, but there were others that we were working on that just didn't go through didn't make it through the congressional process.
Yeah. So again, thanks Mallory, and you're more than welcome to join us anytime on the Broadband Hui, and I'll keep you posted if there's anything specifically that we'd like to have Congressman Case sort of address or respond to.
Yeah, absolutely. Please keep us in the loop. We want to be a good partner. So thank you all. It was lovely to meet you. I hope to see you folks soon. Thank you.
Okay, aloha. All right. Again, thank you to Congressman Case's office for that earmark, and definitely pay attention to the eventual rollout of that as it trickles down to us here locally. Okay, next up, I wanted to give Elisa Valentin a chance to talk about a paper that I think it's more than just a paper. It's like a blueprint, but I want to give you a chance to talk about it. Maybe Sean, you wanna do a little intro and say a few words about public knowledge.
How did you know? Yes, I do. I just want to say, uh, thanks for being here, Lisa. Public Knowledge is a fantastic leading organization nationally across a range of policy issues. Fantastic resource for those who are interested. I just want to give you a sense of the issues that Public Knowledge addresses: broadband access, content moderation, copyright reform, free expression, net neutrality, platform regulation, spectrum policy, one of my favorites with Harold Feld and friends, and trustworthy AI. So I know I see your name a lot on filings, so I know you're super active and leading public knowledge efforts. So welcome to the Broadband Hui, Hawaii's leadership version of policy thinking.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Really appreciate it. And really excited to be here with you all. Again, my name is Elisa Valentine, and I'm the Broadband Policy Director at Public Knowledge. And in the policy community, as you all know, we collaborate often. And so one of my favorite collaborators is here who worked with me on the Blueprint for Equitable Digital Participation, Claudia Ruiz, who works at Unidos US. So I'll turn it over to Claudia to introduce herself before we get into the meat of the Blueprint.
Hey, thanks for that, Elisa. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having us. Congrats, Bert, on your retirement. I hope you already have some plans lined up. Like Elisa mentioned, my name is Claudia Ruiz. I'm the Senior Civil Rights Policy Advisor at Unidos. For those of you not familiar with Unidos US, we are the nation's largest Latino civil rights and advocacy organization. And something that's particularly unique about our organization is that in addition to being a policy shop, and in addition to serving as a national intermediary that provides pass-through funding to community-based organizations, we also convene a network of 320 plus community-based organizations across the country that are Latino-serving, Latino-led nonprofits that provide direct services to communities. And one of those services that we provide and programs that we help run through those communities, through those community-based organizations, is our digital skilling, digital access, and digital adoption program. So everything from broadband access programs all the way up through basic digital skilling and even AI certificates. And so while my title is, a civil rights advisor, my portfolio specifically emphasizes the ways in which technology and broadband access and adoption intersects with civil rights and civil liberties issues. And that was very much the lens that Elisa and I definitely agreed on when we started, when she definitely started the vision for this project and really kind of fashioning a new kind of concept of what it means to actually be a digital participant in our modern day society and democracy. And so that's sort of my spiel. I'll give it back over to Elisa as we dig in.
Great. So just to kind of provide you all with an overview as to why we even started on this project in the first place, and I did put a link to it in the chat for you all. So as part of Public Knowledge's ongoing effort to ensure that we're better centering equity in our work through partnerships on the national and local level, what we advocate for, and also how we advocate for the public interest. That was kind of what started this up. And we have different work streams, as you just heard Sean outline, and every team is supposed to be working on kind of an equity overlay project. So in 2024, I approached Claudia, whose organization, as she just mentioned, has a ton of partners on the ground, as well as the folks at National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And I essentially was like, let's get out of DC, right? Let's actually talk to people. Let's talk to communities. Let's better elevate folks' experiences as it relates to broadband. Because one thing that we always are hearing when we're having conversations with folks on the Hill or at the FCC is that we need to hear folks' stories, right? We know that stories move hearts, but we know that data can move minds. So we hosted focus groups across the country in Colorado, in Georgia, in New Mexico, in Ohio from September 2024 to March 2025 with participants that were living in households with an annual income of $70,000 or less. And then following the conclusion of these focus groups. We had a nationwide survey that went out in April of 2025 that included 107 participants to capture folks' challenges associated with broadband access, broadband affordability, and broadband adoption. From our kind of perspective, when it comes to federal policy making in DC, as you all know, it continues to operate through networks of access, right? Networks of influence and well-resourced interests. And we wanted to make sure that we kind of tip the scales and make sure that we're focusing on low income and middle income households that are often erased from these conversations, or their perspectives are challenged, or their perspectives are misconstrued. And so we wanted to make sure that our recommendations, as Claudia included in our report, we want to make sure the recommendations pass the kitchen table test. So this blueprint for equitable digital participation, again, is about confronting systemic exclusion by centering the community wisdom of those who are most impacted by digital divide. And I'll turn it over to Claudia so she can tell you how she was able to get sign off on this project from Unidos.
Yeah, so like Elisa mentioned, right? So the interesting thing, and I think the other reason why this project was a particular strong showing and tour de force in terms of collaboration is that, you know, as much as public knowledge is the leader in terms of policy, sort of policy world in DC, in terms of internet broadband policy, the very technical pieces, we were able to marry that with sort of like the broader moment that we were living in. So when we started this project, it was in the wake of the winding down and cancellation of the Affordable Connectivity Program, or the ACP. While we were running this project, it happened to coincide with the change in administration, which also came with the unlawful cancellation of the Digital Equity Act. Each of which we also know those two programs were also part of the third kind of piece to that package of the bipartisan infrastructure law was the BEAD program. So taken together, those three were programs that both Elisa and I, in our roles as sort of tech and telecoms advocates, were really active in pushing those, making sure that we were centering communities of color, in particular low-income communities, working families, making sure that those were really sort of at the center and the forethought of the design of these programs. And so with that sort of in mind, I really kind of wanted to offer a frame that I think is important context for everything that we're going to kind of tick down, and sort of the key findings that we're going to highlight for you today. And that's that while we still call a lot of this work tech policy or internet policy or digital equity policy, that framing kind of undersells what we're really actually talking about, right? In 2026, internet access is itself core infrastructure in the same way that electricity is, that running water is, or that roads or that public transportation infrastructure are also core infrastructure. So in many ways, internet is actually the connective tissue that runs through every other issue families face. So whether it's healthcare access, whether it's education access and attainment, whether it's employment, housing, civic participation, you name it, you can't really fully access any of those activities without functional broadband, without a functional device, and without actually the skills to navigate online and actually know how to access these kind of areas online as well. And yet we also know that the digital divide did not appear out of nowhere. In many ways, we view it as simply the latest expression of a legacy of deliberate exclusion, chronic underinvestment, and structural and even systemic neglect that many historically marginalized communities, so like Black communities, Latino communities, AANHPI communities, other Indigenous communities, low-income families, these are all issues that they have already faced and always had to live with. And so the same zip codes that might have been redlined, that have been denied investment, that were even denied the right to vote, right? All of these are the same communities caught often on the wrong side of the digital divide, and that is not a coincidence. And so here's what really makes that kind of point especially urgent. And that's that one of the most common things that you hear from leading tech and telecoms executives or even from policymakers is that the internet is served as the great democratizer, right? And I understand, I think we all can appreciate sort of the instinct behind that saying. And that's that in theory, right, access to information and the World Wide Web, as we used to call it, should have really evened the playing field and provided sort of unprecedented access like we had not seen before. But the reality is that democracy, much like the internet, is not a static thing. It is not a one-time event where you just have to turn on the faucet and let it run, right? We know that is a living, evolving, participatory process that requires showing up, that requires being heard, that requires engagement with lawmakers. So lawmakers and policymakers are aware of the needs of communities and making sure that those needs are met so that families can navigate systems, organize themselves with their neighbors, and really fight for the resources that they need. And the reality is that the digital divide at this point is making all of that harder for the communities that we know are already shut out of this process. And so when you can't get on online to actually apply for a new job, a better paying job, if you can't access your health portal or you can't find out what programs or benefit programs exist to help your family, then the internet isn't actually democratizing anything, right? It is in many ways the actual mechanism that is locking people out of democratic processes and democratic and civic participation. And so I think that that was really sort of the other kind of frame for this project. And we really wanted to ensure that we had authentic community voices, not ones that were filtered through experts or not translated by intermediaries. I mean, as policy people, we often tend to play that role of translator, but we wanted to get away from that practice specifically and be able to have those community voices be the ones that are talking directly to policymakers and the folks in industry that really need to hear about what the needs that their consumers and that their constituents really have, because that in itself is democracy at work, working the way that it should.
Absolutely. And some of the things that we found, and I'll make sure I read some of these quotes as I go along, to focus on the point of broadband access. We saw issues related to broadband resilience and reliability impacting a lot of communities across both rural and urban areas. As you all know, in the United States, we have a lot of underfunded and fragmented broadband infrastructure that leaves people vulnerable to service disruptions. And we believe that, of course, the infrastructure law does provide some opportunity to build resilience, but the high cost program, which is housed at the FCC, could possibly serve as a long-term funding source to ensure that networks are consistently hardened against disasters and that consumers have reliable backup power during various outages. We heard from a couple of participants in Denver, Colorado, who said, and I'm reading here directly, frequently it'll just cut out and it'll cut out for the entire neighborhood without any notice. Often that night is when it will usually cut out fairly consistently. Another participant talked about a similar issue and how it impacted their academic experience because they were a college student. And they said, I can echo that happens to me when the summer semester just ended and I had one paper to turn in. And I was like, please come on before 11:59 when the paper is due because I can't submit a 17-page paper via my phone. We also heard from folks in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and also in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who expressed a lot of concerns about their internet infrastructure or the lack thereof. One resident said that they feel as though ISPs don't feel like it is cost effective for them, and they do not realize how many people are desperate to get connected. Another resident described a 40-mile radius around their home where no reliable internet service exists except for very expensive satellite options. They said, we just cannot get internet in our area. Being able to stay connected to the rest of the world for our kids and ourselves is important. No neighbors can get it. The whole 40-mile radius, and we have no service other than satellite, which is extremely expensive. And even that I have heard is very touch and go. Also, we heard a lot of complaints from folks in Appalachia and Marietta, Ohio, that we're talking about inadequate broadband infrastructure and how that shapes their families' experiences and opportunities. One mother of two said, I have two children that like to game, and if they're on at the same time, I have to hear, it's lagging. Our internet is terrible, Mom. We need new internet. Someone else said that they have to work from home occasionally, but they're limited as to what they can do because of the large operating system that they use for work. They can't even open it at their home. Another person said that when there was a snowstorm in Marietta, Ohio, and their office was technically open because they were able to work from home, this person was not able to work from home because she did not have access to reliable internet. And of course, on the affordability front, across all of our focus groups, everyone was advocating for the Affordable Connectivity Program to come back. There was a lot of concerns with folks, for example, in Atlanta, Georgia, saying that they have 5 kids and a wife, and they find it very difficult to be able to afford broadband, and that $40 is pushing it, and it's limiting them on what's in the refrigerator, a utility bill, water, electricity. And they said, so it's either put food on the table for 6 or have internet. And again, we consistently heard from folks about the Affordable Connectivity Program, and they were urging us to work with Congress to find a way to make sure that this program is revitalized in the future. And I'll turn it over to Claudia to quickly go over what we heard about digital skills and connected devices, and then we'll offer up what the final kind of call to action is.
Yeah, so I think again, as everybody in this room knows well, right, there's sort of three pillars to digital equity. It's like the affordability and access, it's the access piece and the second piece is affordability, and the third is adoption. And for us, we kind of define adoption, I would say, as two sub pillars. One is access to an actual device, right, that you can take full advantage of the internet from, and then also making sure that you're equipped with the level of skilling that's appropriate and actually meets the moment and all of the needs that you may have on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that there's unfortunately, and I think we saw this in sort of the fights around the Digital Equity Act specifically, that there is a persistent and pretty harmful narrative in Washington that the reason people aren't online is because they don't want to be, or they don't understand really why it matters. And I think our research fully kind of debunks that notion completely and entirely. And I think that's the reason for that is that the people in our focus groups, everyday people, working families, mothers, parents, they understood that the internet's value deeply and personally resonates for them, and they could even really readily articulate the ways in which broadband access or affordable broadband or the requisite level of skilling would actually improve sort of their life, would it be able to improve the quality of their life. And what the other thing that was very clear is they weren't skeptical of technology or the internet at all. What was happening is that they were blocked from fully using it by a combination of factors related to cost, unreliable devices, and unaffordable devices, or even just a plain lack of skilling support to meet them where they are. So to really quickly tick down some of the findings we have on devices specifically, something that surfaced was the fact that many participants in our focus groups relied exclusively on smartphones as their primary and sometimes only means of accessing the internet. And so while we know a smartphone can do a lot, it's also obvious that it cannot substitute for a laptop, a student writing or a desktop and writing a 17-page paper, for example, right? It's not a quality substitute when you're filling out a job application, or even when you're trying to run a small business. And so we know that device access continues, and the gaps in device access continues to be a problem in need of a solution. And any broadband strategy that ignores sort of this gap will necessarily be incomplete. And to pull out sort of a quote that we had from a participant in Denver, she put it pretty plainly in the sense that she said that their community, quote, needed training on devices, on how to even start them, empower them, how to use them, wake them up, and also cautionary things like how to avoid phishing scams or fraud. Basically, education and access to devices. And that's really kind of the clear combination, right? Not one or the other. It needs to be both and. And then transitioning quickly to sort of the digital skills piece. Again, we know that connectivity without the skills to use it meaningfully leaves people stranded. And that's what our communities also told us clearly in these focus groups, that it is not enough to merely offer training. It also has to be the right kind of training in the right language and even delivered through the right kind of trusted messengers. As one participant in our Albuquerque group said, quote, accessible classes in the language, programs that assist with barriers. These are things that we need. In my experience, I've seen programs that give away computers, but if people don't know how to use them, and she really does trail off in that quote. And that sentence hangs for a reason, right? Because we all know how that sentence ends. And that's that the device remains unused, it sits in a closet, or it's even not factored in as a worthy cost, right? For families that are already struggling with inflation, the high cost of living, and sort of the economic strain that we know so many people are facing. And then for those who do think that devices plus training solves a problem, I want to leave you with this sort of another sort of sub-layer when it comes to actually designing inclusive digital skilling programs. And this is a quote from one of our participants in Appalachia, who provides services to some of the elderly folks in her community. She said, quote, "We still have a lot of people that we run into and serve that still do not read or write. And so having to fill out a consent form or to do something, they have no ability to do that. So giving them a device and saying, this is a program that you're getting, this device, these are the skills you're going to get, they're not even going to know how to use it because they're not going to be able to read the directions or even understand what directions are saying. And I think that is really the depth of wraparound support that really highlights a lot of the things that Elisa and I call for in our advocacy work around digital equity programs, and making sure that this wraparound support is actually included and that it's actually kind of informing the ways in which these programs are designed and structured.
Thank you, Claudia. And just a couple of kind of call to action pieces that we have in our document, but we'd also just like to quickly share with you all. So Universal Service Fund reform is urgent. So I saw a question in the chat related to USF. So Universal Service is a fund that's paid for by telecom carriers, right, including wireline and wireless providers. Oftentimes it's passed along to consumers. And so you'll see at the bottom of your phone bill, you might see something that says like universal service fee or something of that sort. And so we think it's really important that the Lifeline program, the $9.25 subsidy that low income folks are eligible to get, we think it needs to be reformed to look a lot more like the Affordable Connectivity Program. This is something that we have been consistently having conversations with the Universal Service Fund Working Group about this. We really urge you all to make sure that your members of Congress and your senators weigh in with the USF working group. USF working group, just by way of background, is currently led by Senator Fisher, who represents the state of Nebraska, and then Senator Ben Ray Lujan, who represents the state of New Mexico. We really think, again, this program needs to be urgently updated. We are calling for a $40 benefit for low income households. And we also think it's really important that you all are just kind of aware of some of the nefarious behavior that's happening at the Federal Communications Commission, besides the things that you're always seeing, on TV about, media ownership issues and things of that sort. There's also a proceeding right now that came from Chair Carr's office to kind of change the enrollment process for the Lifeline program. They're really kind of weaponizing the narrative of waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think that this is going to be something that ends up kind of like lessening the amount of people who even try to enroll in the Lifeline program. We know Lifeline is already a hassle for folks to enroll in. And so we think this is just kind of a way, again, of trying to lessen the amount of folks that are eligible to participate. And they're doing this again by weaponizing the narratives of waste, fraud, and abuse, and also the way that they're speaking about, oh, there's so many immigrant communities, and then there's dead people that are signed up for the Lifeline program and things of that sort. And it's really just Carr is taking advantage of the political moment. That's really what it is. Also, you all may have seen over the last month, Public Knowledge and other organizations have been working on a Digital Equity Act month of action to preserve those $2.75 billion Digital Equity Act funds that Trump unlawfully canceled last year. So within this, of course, our friends at National Digital Inclusion Alliance are currently suing the Trump administration over the competitive grants. And next Thursday, whenever June 11th is, I think that's next Thursday, the oral arguments are going to be heard by NDIA in the DC Circuit Court. So we'll see where that lands. But what's problematic is recently Trump submitted a proposal to Congress to completely nix the funds. So if Congress were to do that, then the court case wouldn't matter anymore. So it's really important that you speak with folks so they can speak with appropriators to make sure that that funding isn't canceled, particularly as this court case is ongoing. And I think, Claudia, you want to speak about BEAD non-deployment funds, even though we still don't know where things stand with that. And NTIA doesn't even know where things stand with that. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so, BEAD was sort of like the third piece of this puzzle. And what was particularly, or something that I know that a lot of our coalitions fought for when this program was being stood up, was ensuring that states were permitted to use some non-deployment dollars. So just to back up for background, BEAD was meant to be infrastructure investment, right? To actually build out and modernize some of the physical infrastructure, the physical internet infrastructure. And what states were permitted to do in those guidelines is use any leftover funds that they had for sort of digital equity-like activities. So whether that was their own version of ACP, their own sort of monthly benefit, whether that was skilling programs, whether that was device access programs, states were going to be in charge, and it was up to the states to decide how to use those dollars and meet the needs of their communities. And so that's something that also is an open question mark right now, is what is actually going to happen with those non-deployment funds, because that's something that this administration has also been trying to claw back and or actually institute kind of rougher guardrails around how the ways in which those funds could be used. And so the other thing that I wanted to do before sort of closing us out is name and zoom out and like kind of really contextualize everything that's going on in the current sort of AI moment, the AI chaos moment that we're living in. We talk a lot about how law and policymakers need to walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's unfortunately sort of the same situation that I think we're in right now. Because the fights that we're describing that Elisa ticked us through, right, over Lifeline, over the Digital Equity Act, over Universal Service Fund reform, even over being deployment funds, they're not actually just about broadband, right? Ultimately, what they are is the foundation for the moment that's coming next. Because at the same time as all of these discussions and a lot of these advocacy fights are going on, there's also massive federal and state level debates happening about AI governance, about how data centers are constructed, regulated, and governed, discussions around algorithmic accountability, and even who controls the infrastructure that will really kind of underpin our sort of evolving digital first economy. And here is really sort of the hard truth. And again, as broadband folks, I think you guys intuitively understand this better than most. And that's that if we do not first take meaningful action to close the digital divide, communities that are already caught on the wrong side of it will be that much further away in the continued sort of evolving AI arms race. And what that's going to result in is having absolutely no seat at the table and absolutely no say in the ways in which a lot of the governance programs will be built out, stood up, and ultimately deployed. And so we know that the digital divide doesn't even just stop at broadband. In the year of 2026, the era of AI, it maps on directly and will inform who gets to shape AI, who even gets to access and use AI tools, who can be protected from some of the harms and biases that we know result from these AI tools, and ultimately who can actually who can get locked out of some of the benefits that AI is promised to us. So I think I just really kind of wanted to underscore the fact that as we continue to all be a little bit captured, right, by the AI discussion, it's, I think, really important to name the fact that AI itself is nothing more but another mapping point on the digital equity continuum, right? It's just another sort of point or intersectional point where decisions that we make now on how to govern, how to support communities actually accessing these tools, as long as we can kind of make those right choices right now, then we can actually set ourselves up and position ourselves to really live in a world in which technology really is equitable and is actually used in ways or deployed in ways that actually help communities sort of build power, build influence, and ultimately have sustained sort of opportunity. So I'll pause there. I don't know, Elisa, if you wanted to add anything.
No, I'm good. I'm good. But if anyone has any, questions, now we're happy to take them, or if you want to chat with us offline, also happy to do that as well. And thank you again, Bert, for inviting us. We appreciate it. And
yeah,
Sean.
Lisa, no, that was really great, very informative, and thanks for the links. I did want to kind of move on because I got Jake waiting for a short presentation on an application that he developed. So we'll hold any kind of questions, and you guys have you have Lisa's and Claudia's contacts, so feel free to connect with them, and we'll definitely take a look at the action items with regard to the blueprint. And I think a lot of it we've already been doing, so we'll just keep on marching forward. Okay, with that, I want to kind of give it over to Jake, and Jake, why don't you do a little brief introduction and how you went about developing this civic transparency app called Stoa.
Thanks, Bert. Hi, everyone. I'm Jake. I've been a data engineer for around 5 years now. That's my day job, but I'm also the founder of Stoa. And I'll share my screen if that's okay. I assume.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Here we go. Sure.
So Jake, we got just about 9 minutes, so I'll leave it to you to squeeze it all in.
So in short, this is Stoa. As a brief forward, I found that, like, say if you need to find the weather or the news or what have you, there's a canonical source ultimately you can go to find that information, whether it be, weather.com or whatever. But if you want to find what's happening on a local level for government, well, you can go to the direct source. It's not necessarily intuitive to navigate, and even if you can navigate to the data you want, it often is like condensed in these very lengthy bills or multi-hour meetings. And so I thought it'd be for the average citizen to really have transparency in what's happening in their local community, that there needed to be a tool effectively to aggregate that information into one place that they can, at a glance, see what's happening in their community. And so this is Stoa. So right now we're in Honolulu City and County, and basically it's just that it's aggregating what's happening in the city at this moment. So what how Stoa works effectively is it's built on the building blocks of open source data that we have for the cities. That's legislation, that's meetings. Um, those are the two core building blocks, and from there we derive more information with the use of AI. And so with a start, we have basically a weekly briefing that consolidates all the different bills and council meetings that happen for a given week. And then we aggregate it into a nice little weekly blurb that you can read just to get yourself oriented with what's happening. And then scrolling down, we're going to take a specific path through the site. We have the issues affecting the community, right? So clicking to an issue, we'll choose affordable housing, for example. And so I want to call out this issue was generated by the system, right? I didn't hand put this there. The system semantically links different bills and meetings together, tries to find basically commonalities, and then extracts an issue from what it sees from the data. So in this case, we have three different bills relating to housing taxation. And so we have a nice little list. We have a nice little visual just showing how everything is related to each other. I enjoy that personally. And then we have a nice timeline of the issue. So, okay, we have this issue. All right, let's learn more about it. And so again, this is all derived from data within the app, but then going deeper, we can find one of the actual building blocks of Stoa. So this is a bill, right? Note that this is the actual title of the bill, and then I use AI to basically summarize a human readable version of what this legislation is actually about. Because often bill titles are practically a paragraph, right? It's not readable at all. So I try to make it easier to read for the average person, and then I summarize it, right? Why it matters, what it does, who it affects, what happens next. And we can see here that this bill was sponsored by Esther and Tommy, and we can also see the voting status of this bill, right? And where it is in the timeline for this legislation. And I guess going back to what we were talking about earlier in this meeting about, keeping keeping provenance, I guess you could say, of like how we get data from AI. There's a view source button, of course, that directly links you to the bill. If Honolulu's infrastructure will cooperate. Yep. And so again, you can see the same title that we showed before and the voting record for this bill and the 9 A's. Yeah, and so this is just again a building block that's then fed into this overall summary is fed into the model to generate that weekly briefing along with meetings. And then every one of those building blocks I was just talking about is plotted onto a map. So basically I extract geocodable strings, if you will, from my different building blocks or agenda items or bills or what have you. And then, yeah, just geocode them. And then we can see exactly, say, where, if you live, I live in McCully, so this is my neck of the woods, but you can see what's happening near you, right? So sure enough, if we click near the zoo area, you see some legislation. This is a resolution actually, but relating to the zoo, right? And it's of course color coded by the different civic entities, and you can filter by time. So it's a little light this week, but you can filter as needed. So that's that. And then yeah, all this basically ties into the overall tool. that gives you, I think, a better, I guess you could say, perspective on what's happening in your community. Yeah.
So, Jake, one of the bills that we have been sort of following, and I just am curious about how Stoa would display it, and it's I guess bills that were looking at defunding the Office of Economic Revitalization. How would you go about looking at the current status of that particular initiative?
So you would use the search. I will say this product is very much still imperfect. There are bugs with it, but what if we had, say, a keyword? Do you know? So what was the bill about again? Maybe I can type in a
Well,
keyword
it's
in
the
it. Office.
Office of Economic Revitalization.
Economic. That should just be enough, right? Okay, we have a few bills here. Hmm. To be fair, the corpus that Stoa currently has is not for the purposes of, funding. It's not fully complete as of this moment. So I think I only go back
Uh,
early April. But in general, how Stoa would handle that is basically it would ingest the bill text, and then it would run it through a model, effectively summarizing, like you said before, every gets treated the same. So going back to our sample here, every bill would have a why it matters, what it does, who it affects, and it would be treated like every other bill. And then if that bill happened to be related to a meeting or to a larger theme, right, it would be linked to the issue for that respective problem. Possibly geocoded.
and was there a particular reason why you were able to do Honolulu uh, as opposed to, let's say, Maui? Is it obviously it's a different data structure, and so
So
what is it about Maui that makes it a little bit more difficult or challenging?
So the ironic thing is actually, I'd say Honolulu is harder than Maui. So because
Oh,
Honolulu, in particular, their uh, their legislative, system, so to speak, is all their own custom handiwork, right? But so I had to write custom code to ingest that. However, and so this is true for many states and cities and across the country. And I should say, mind you, you might have seen. I'm sure many people in this room are familiar with digital democracy and the work they're doing with summarizing state legislator. This is strictly a city and county layer, not to compete with the digital democracy, but rather just um, a complementary layer. And so, indeed, we do have other cities. I will say, especially for the purposes of the demo, I have not thoroughly audited all these cities. However, to your point, Maui is actually easier because what Maui, Phoenix, Albuquerque, St. Paul, Pittsburgh, etc., they all use a system, in this case called Registrar. So this is a common API basically that allows you to fetch, meetings, bills, etc., in a unified
mm-hmm.
way. And so that's why Stoa actually scales very cleanly because if your city uses Registrar, odds are with pretty little work, maybe a day's worth of work, you can get it online. So we can look
Okay.
at Maui. I will say I have not thoroughly audited the Maui experience, but it's very similar, right? You have a nice weekly blurb, um, different actions you can take as a citizen, and then different issues. Again, because the legislation, the history I have for these cities at the moment, right? Like I had to ingest the bills and meetings and such. It's not as uh, long as probably it could be. So then the longer the history, the more rich the data and the issues are. For the purposes of a demo, it's just for the last few months.
Okay, Jake, we're going to have to wind down pretty soon. So
Sure.
does that pretty much conclude your presentation?
Yeah, and here I'll put my email to in the chat and link to the website if anyone's curious. But yeah, that's pretty much that's Stoa in a nutshell. Thanks for letting me present, Bert.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. And sorry we had to rush a little bit at the end
No,
here,
you're
but
good. Thanks for having me.
lots of interesting, presentations and information that's available. I wanted to share it with the Hui. Okay, with that, that concludes the 271st convening of the Broadband Hui. Our next meeting will take place on June 17th. So I hope to see you all back here for the Broadband Hui 272nd. And in the meantime, y'all stay safe, y'all stay awesome. We'll see you next time. Aloha, everybody.